So my name is Chastity Craft. I'm the literacy consultant here at KVEC, and I think I have some team members on here with me. So I appreciate them joining me and going to help me out and can interject and add to the conversation as need be. So we're going to be talking about the Kentucky academic standards and how they are, and your alternate assessment targets for reading and writing, and some resources on how to help you teach those standards for your students. Okay, so this information that I'm getting ready to share with you was partnered by all of our co-ops across the state. So what we're going to be talking about is just doing a brief overview of the reading and writing standards, talk about the alternate assessment targets, and then talk about some instructional support resources that will help you guys teach those. So first, just to talk about the academic standards for just a little bit. The Kentucky academic standards are what we use as a guide to teach our students. And this is the content that we look at that's going to guide our instruction. And even for our students who are on alternate assessment, they are still going to receive instruction on all of the standards that are in the standards document. So with our alternate assessment targets, this is a little bit, it kind of gets confusing sometimes on, what they are and how you're supposed to use those and what responsibility that you have. So first of all, the targets are not standards. You don't have a separate set of instructional standards for students that's on alternate assessment. The teachers teach, like I said earlier, the Kentucky academic standards to all the students, including students that is on alternate assessment. And then what you do is you are going to modify and provide scaffolding instruction and doing little things that is going to help your students get access to that general curriculum. And then you have targets for specific grades. And so you use those targets, and actually, if you guys aren't familiar with those already, a lot of them, there's not a whole lot of difference between what is expected of the students on alternate assessment and then what's expected of the students that are that's on the regular testing. So you do have there are a few differences, but some of them there's not a lot. So like I said, we'll get into that just a little bit. And then reading has 10 standards with targets, and they're tested in grades 3 through 8 and grade 10. And then writing has 6 standards tested in grades 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. So with all that being said, you have your reading and writing standards, and then you have some targets for testing purposes. So now we're going to get into those supports. So this is the instructional support document. So what we did is we have the circle here, and we have the standard listed exactly how it is in the standards document. And then in red, you have your alternate assessment target. And that way you can look at the standard and the target together, and you can see the differences, if there are any differences in the two. And then on the other side is the multidimensionality of the standard, and it's color coded, and it's broken down, and the purpose of this is to help you get complete understanding of what is expected of the students. Sometimes we teach a standard, and sometimes there's like a little word like "and" that we overlook sometimes or don't really fully understand, and to get the whole content of what's expected of that student. So then what we do, this is kind of a guide to help you look at what the student is expected to do. So the green is the comprehension piece that they have to do. The purple is the analysis, and then the maroon is the content that's going to be covered in the standard. And then over here on this side where I have the yellow box are the prerequisite. So if you look at the template here, if you're looking at your standards, normally right here, the middle is like the current grade level. And then this would be your current grade level that you're looking at if you're looking at a standards document. This column here would be the grade below, and this column here would be a grade above the standard listed, so that you would know what they would need to know, what the standard is before and what standard is going to be coming next. So what we did with that is we wanted to, since this would be the grade level below, if you were looking at your standards document, these are some skills that your kids would need to know in order to use the current target that you're working for. So here are some recommended statements or targets that you can use. We put it in student-friendly terms that you can use on what you're teaching now to address this target here. But of course, if you have students that may not be at this level, we put some skills here of what they would need to know before they get into this level of content. And then, like I said, I got ahead of myself a little bit. So this box here are some recommended targets that you can use. And like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. It just you can use just some examples. You can use this to create your own, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what is expected of your students and what needs to be taught for this standard. And then this column right here are some key vocabulary terms that your students would need to know in order to achieve the knowledge of the standard that you're working on. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. There may be more, but what we tried to do is we looked at the standard, what they would have to know to have that standard met. And then we wanted to look at some key terms that was in there that would be critical to their understanding. So we put those vocabulary words here that they would need to know. Down here are some resources for you to be able to get a deeper understanding of the standard. So because sometimes when you look at this, sometimes the terminology and these standards are difficult, and especially if you're a new teacher or you're new to the content. Maybe you've switched different grade levels, maybe you've just switched roles in your teaching and you're not as familiar with some of the standards as others. Then you may not, even if you read the standard, you may not fully understand what some of that means. And that's okay, because it's the terminology can be difficult. And when I go through and when I was teaching these standards and having to understand those, I had to take them down and read it, break it down and read it and really think about what each of those standards are, what they're wanting me to do. So if you need some additional resources to help you understand what that standard is asking you to do, those are resources for you. And then on the other side are instructional tools for your students. Okay, so this is a writing example. It is an 8th grade one, and it says to use knowledge of language and its conventions when writing, speaking, reading, or listening. Okay, so knowledge of language and its conventions. Okay, so and then on A it says use verbs in the active and passive voice. Okay, so let's stop right there because that's a lot of information already. So just based on what we've talked about right now, the knowledge of language and its conventions. Well, first of all, what is conventions? Would it be, do you think it would, and think about when it says writing, speaking, reading, or listening. So something that would fall in all four of those categories. Would it fall under, do you think it would be something that would do with the organization piece when you're writing an essay? Or do you think it would be something that we would need to know about punctuation and syntax, the order of the words, saying the words in the right order, spelling, more of that? Which one do you think it would be?
April says that it's the mechanics.
Syntax, maybe?
So yeah, so it would, yeah, it's the all of the punctuation, the spelling, the errors. So I think language mechanics is also, that is another way of saying that, and the rules, like your spelling rules and all of that. So that part is the conventions piece. Okay. And I think that's an example too, like when we talk about, the writing conventions. If you're not sure what conventions mean, then that piece that we're going to get down that has that deeper understanding, that's where you can go to get more information about that. That's an example of that. Okay, so then they have to have knowledge of that and use verbs in the active and the passive voice. And then it's talking about emphasizing the action, expressing uncertainty. Okay. And then, so let's go down to your target. And it says limit the full standard to active and passive voice, and still look at the conventions. And then down here, so looking at that, and what I always like to do is first look at your vocabulary, because you want to introduce vocabulary at the very beginning and know what those key terms are talking about. Because if you go any further and start talking about your lesson, and if they don't understand that terminology, then you've already lost them. So I would recommend, when you're doing the lesson, go ahead and start with your vocabulary. So even though the vocabulary is on the far right side of the document, I would look there first and see what words they would need to know. So they would have to know active verbs, active voice, the conditional mood. I'm not going to read all through of those, but that's the key vocabulary. Now there's a bunch here, and Anita Archer says the research 3 to 5 words at a time is what she would recommend introducing at one time. So depending on your students, only introduce 3 to 5. If they need to know more than that, then break it into different segments. But if you can narrow it down to 3 to 5, and they would still get enough of that critical understanding of what you're talking about on your lesson, then you can limit to that. Would be best. Okay, so then you wanted to make sure what your prerequisite skills, and then you would go through. Okay, I want to go on because and show you some of these resources that we have, because I really think that you're going to love them and be able, I think it'll make your job a lot easier. Okay, so it's a link, and it's just the Google site that houses all these resources. So we're going to click on here. Okay, and it looks like this. So here are your reading targets by grade level. So we'll just do 7. Okay, so this is this is what you would have when you click on it, which is what we've been going through here. Okay, so this one says analyze how particular events of a story or drama influence one another. Okay, and then this one says limit the full standard to the character, plot, setting, and conflict resolution. So you only have, for testing purposes, again, for instructional purposes, they need to have access to all of it, but they're going to be tested on knowing the character, plot, setting, and conflict resolution. Okay. And then, of course, there's your vocabulary. There are some targets. And then, so in order to know this, they're going to be able, they need to know, example, what plot setting and characters are, and be able to identify key details in a story, and then connect a problem with a character or a setting. So they're going to have to be able to do that before that they can analyze those events. And so over here, then you can, all of these are links that you can click on. So it takes you to this page. So all of this right here, these are all lessons that you can click on and that will address that standard. And there's a little pre-test. So this one talks about story elements. So you can click on that. So this one, it tells you, and then you can print it, tells you your objective, the warm-up activity, your lesson, independent work, and then how to wrap it up. And it even gives you some estimated times on, how long just to give you an idea of how long that lesson would be. So that's what all these resources are like that on, all of these would take you to the different ones. So then, okay, and all of those are the same. You just click on the grade level and the layout is exactly the same. There's your resources, and then it's going to do that every time. Okay. And then it goes down to all, and it has them for all the standards. I just use the first one, but if you keep scrolling, it's laid out exactly the same. And then for the writing, it's again exactly the same, but we'll quickly, because I know writing is more difficult to teach, I think anyway. So, and then, here it says, like this one, for example, they have to know all of this except, E is the only thing that they're not tested on. So they're tested just like everybody else on this standard except for E. So this one's a little bit more in depth, but it's writing and it's also 8th grade. So there's a list of those for you. And then here are some resources for you, some sentence starters, and okay. So then it just gives you some resources here that you can go and get lessons and things like that. Okay. And then here's also a link to just the standards, to go back to the kystandards.org in order just to get that. Now down here are some SDI tools that you can use also to help determine SDI. So this is the reading that will help once you determine the area of weakness that would prohibit. These are broken down into the 5 components of reading. Then you can come here and see what area it falls under. If it's a phonics issue, then you can come over here, and here are some strategies that will help you implement on what to implement to increase that skill in phonics. And here are links that will help you measure, some methods of measurement that would help with your progress monitoring. So all of that is there. The writing one is the same way. It's laid out exactly the same. And it's broken down to the different pieces of writing. You have the fluency, legibility, there's the conventions that we talked about earlier as our example. And over here are the strategies. and some methods of measurement, ways that things that you can use to progress monitor. Okay, and then this is a little document. It's used, it kind of accompanies the schoolhouse document, and it's just some general SDI strategies that you can use. And then it goes down to some literacy specific tools and strategies, and there's links here. So those are all there for you that takes you directly to strategies that you can implement quickly, and it gives you information about it. But this website, I think, if you just have access to this website alone and have time to go in it and look at it and use the links, I think that it would really help you with in your classroom and teaching your students. Okay, then you have the Kentucky Alternate Assessment Google site. And here are some more resources. This is got all of them here that you need. We're talking about reading, right? Well, that takes you to this one as well. So you may just need that one link to the Google site, but also there. This is what I want. So this is okay. So this one, let me kind of gives you a guideline here on your testing window, and it's just kind of has it all on just in a more compact order for you with your standards, kind of an organizational piece to help you with your timelines and things like that. So you have all that. And then down here, I mean, it's just, I feel like I'm overwhelming you guys, and I do apologize, because as I go through this, it's like there is a lot of information, but it's so good. And we were just excited to share it with you. But again, I think it's just this one site just houses, when you have chance, just to kind of go through it. So don't let it overwhelm you, because it is a lot of information, but it's all, if you just take your time and go through it, then you know, it'll be okay. So here, like I said, here are some additional resources, post-secondary. And I think this is, and this, it makes you, you can make your own copy of it. So this is another organizational piece. That tells you, like it has the key of like the testing window, your guiding principles. Now your guiding principles, that's a part in your standard that is what they are expected to do at that standard by the time they graduate. So this is your overall goal for your kids by the time they graduate. And then all your other standards is what is leading up to the ultimate guiding principle. So those are your testing windows and the standards that's tested. And let's see, there's your training requirements. And here are again, more reading and writing resources. And this is what I wanted to get to and show you. I think this down here would be fabulous for you. It's the adaptive book resources, and then links to help you create adaptive books for your students. And so all of these are links that you can go to and search and get books and have access to all of those books as well. But all of these are just, I got lost in these the other day when when I was looking to get ready for today, and you could just get really into it and keep going and going and getting a rabbit hole. But this is kind of like a little door that opens you to a lot of rich resources that would help you with those books. And then here's some just additional resources. Readworks.org is a good website that helps you. The account that you do set up an account, but it's free, and you can use this for reading comprehension checks as well. So it has resources as far as instruction and lessons, but it also has some probes that you can use to monitor your students. I know that it has been overwhelming. I know it has, because I just felt like it's been overwhelming with me talking about it myself, and I'm already familiar with them. So let's talk about what you have seen, what I've showed you, and what are your all's thoughts about it?
Chastity, this is Dion, and I was wondering, as you have shared that on the screen, if you would care to share another one of the standards that you had an example of maybe earlier in the in your presentation that just had like the standard on it.
Okay.
With the alternate assessment target. I know you had some pulled up in your presentation.
Okay, let me go back to that slide, and like just another grade level.
Yeah, whatever
Okay.
grade level, it doesn't matter. Just I wanted to look at an example.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be fine right there.
Let me go
Whichever.
to the actual targets, because those are screenshots and it's not a really good, let me pull up the actual, let's go here.
Okay.
So let's
Yeah,
do fourth grade.
So I thought you did a great job talking about that, but I was just like, for example, in this one, when you're looking at that reading for with literary standards 4.1, and it talks about referring to details and examples in a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. And so the alternate assessment target says limit the full standard to use of details and examples to explain what a text says explicitly, includes drawing inferences. And one of the things I was thinking about is, when we reduce those standards to and have the breadth and depth of those standards reduced, and we're talking about the target, there's some really important pieces, is like, looking at the using details and examples for them to be able to explain what the text says explicitly. So activities that only have them do inferencing might miss the mark on that. So you would want to make sure when you read that standard that you also not only have them infer, but it also says how can they use a detail or an example to explain what that text says. So really, if you think about the way that target's laid out, you have them, that's twofold, right? It's got, you not only have to be able to infer, but you have to be able to give a detail in your text to be able to support that. And I think that's one of the things that when we're talking about the targets for alternate assessment is make sure we know the whole piece of what that's expecting kids to be able to be to do and to be able to assess them at that level. So not only, like I said, sometimes we would choose as we teach, we would choose activities around inferencing, but we really want to make sure that we take that a step farther. Once kids can infer, then how can they back that up with an example? And it just says use a detail, right? So they could be able to explain that. So I was just thinking about that when you were sharing the standards. So that's one thing that we have seen, over time, is that we get parts of the standard or the target, but we miss a few of those other pieces So the depth and the level of that work that we are using with students might need one more step or one more piece, or make sure that it gets all of what the target's asking for us to be able to do. So that was just one of the things I was thinking about when you were sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is a really good example talking about that. Um, then let's go. And then, like I said, the writing is all, let's look at like the 5th grade writing, because those, I think that's one of those two that they just seem they seem more complex, because they have the different sub skills underneath when they want to do those. So, and it's the same thing like you said, but it's, and this one is talking about the on-demand of writing opinion pieces. So you're using writing digital resources on topics or text supporting the writer's perspective with reasons and information. And then, so you go through all of those sub A through F subtopics. And then when you get to the alternate assessment target, it says limit the full standard to a given opinion, interpreting elements of a composition as they are related to a given opinion. And then to me, when I read that quickly, to me, that just sounds like a lot of information. So like I said, even myself, if I'm going back and, I have taught this, and I would still go back and really just have to think about it, because when we plan lessons, sometimes if we don't go back and revisit the target or the standard, then we miss, like you were talking about, the total depth of what's expected of those students. And sometimes it could be just a simple oversight, or that we just kind of miss. So it's difficult. I think it takes, at first, and when you, as you go through these the first time. So that's why that we wanted to make this tool or this document for you, so that you can kind of have this in front of you as you're going through and planning your lessons. And it will give you some things to think about, some kind of front loading some of this information for you, so that it would help you with your understanding of the lesson, while also giving you some resources that you can go and be able to implement those, so that you don't have to go and hunt for those things that's going to support your lesson.
Jess, I was going to just interject just a little bit. I saw you pop up some things about transition, and one of the big rock takeaways for students on alternate assessment is that they're able to communicate effectively, so that they can get their wants and needs met, and that they have access to the curriculum. They can have meaningful relationships and the like. So I want to challenge the folks on here to think about that overall piece of communication and how it fits in with literacy, and being able to communicate with our students, and to be able to unlock some things for them, and to really focus on looking at assistive technology in that area as well, to unlock their ability to write and communicate and have information back and forth with us, because that has to be an overarching goal for all students on alternate assessment. And it certainly plays into the transition piece as they transition beyond post-secondary, to be able to have those meaningful relationships and to have a rich life, and to be able to maybe participate in some type of vocation. And so I just want to throw that in there as an overall thought on this, in terms of where literacy really fits in with when a student is on alternate assessment. It's part of that bigger picture of communicating and being able to unlock those barriers that are standing in the way for these students to have a much more richer life and to be able to participate in vocations and activities that are going to be meaningful for them. And so I just want to throw that in there.
Well, thank you for that and tying that in, because that is something that's really important, and that I like how you tied all that in together. So thank you for sharing that. So what are some strategies or some scenarios in your classroom that you're seeing? How would this document that we've showed you, how would you be able to use that in your classroom, or for you to in your classroom? And do you think this would be helpful for
I
you?
think it'd be good for a reference guide.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's definitely a references, would be, that would be a terrific use for it, just to have to make your job easier. Work smarter, not harder, is something my college professor always told us. So hopefully that because these resources and links that are in here have been vetted for you. So if they're on here and you use them, you know that they're evidence-based strategies. So they're effective for your students. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to add because concerning anything that we talked about today?
Chastity, there was one more thing I just wanted to say. You shared a document just a minute ago in those resources that put the for every grade level what standard was assessed. And it was
like the progression thing. Was it the
your
progression one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think so. And it was just an overall, this is what that document right there. And I thought that was really interesting. And that one is one that I haven't really if you'll just scroll back down there. Yeah. So this one is excellent. And it's one that it's been updated, but if you don't care to scroll on back down there, it's something I thought about when I was looking at this, just to think about, I love that the way that it's highlighted based on when those windows are open for the assessment. But the particular thing I like the most, if you don't mind to scroll on down, is that you may have, when you're teaching and you're an alternate assessment classroom, and you're teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And if you maybe just scroll right there. So those guiding principles, if you're teaching students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, you can see that, like for 3rd grade, that's reading for literature 3.1. So that's 3rd grade standard 1. Again, in 4th grade, reading for literature 4th grade standard 1. So those are over time, you're going to be teaching those standards. So they're going to continue to build on one another as well. And I was just thinking, sometimes it's difficult when we're in a class and we have 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. It's good to be able to see that picture, the whole picture of what grade levels and what those targets are assessed at those different grade levels. So you know that everything that you're doing in each of those grade levels is building, right? So you will already have some resources and some tools in your toolbox for those lessons, and then you just kind of build on the cognitive demand of those each year. So I just like that big picture of those principles, and this is what we're expecting kids to be able to do on alternate assessment over their career, their school career. And I like the way those guiding principles tell you where you're at with that. Same thing for reading for informational text on that guiding principle number 2. A 3rd grade, you're going to be assessing standard 2. They're going to be assessment or targets around standard 2 in 4th grade and 5th grade. And so, really understanding that reading for informational text and what that standard encompasses, and then what that looks like for alternate assessment standards, targets, and again, making sure that we don't miss pieces like that main idea and supporting details. That's what standard 1 is, and standard 2 is I think it's central. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a central theme or something like that. But anyway, you would know. And so if you're building those lessons and activities, you know what this is at 3rd grade, but this is a little bit more they're expecting them at 4th grade, and a little bit more they're expecting them to be able to do at 5th grade. And I just think that would help you overall to be able to see that as a teacher.
Yeah, I like anything that you can kind of get on one page that you can glance and just kind of see a glance, like that, like this, like it says, it's at a glance, a full picture. It helps me to kind of piece it all together and keep it organized. Because even the color coding for the testing windows, because I know when I did the alternate assessment, it tried to keep up with when something was tested and not, it's difficult to keep it all organized for sure. So I like this one, going back to the transition a little bit, because sometimes I think this is another area that is difficult. So I like that we have the whole page that is just dedicated to the post-secondary. And there's just tons and tons of things out there that you can use in order to help with those. So, and I love this. So I think between like you had the 2 main sites and then the links that from those sites to go, I think would be some valuable resources that you can have. The important thing to know is that these resources are here for you. I know one of the biggest challenges that we have as teachers in the classroom is it's like, okay, we know what we need to teach. We just don't have the resources or don't know where to go look for those resources to teach those skills. And so this hopefully will fill that gap for you, that will provide those resources for you that would maybe help with you not having to go and try to search for those resources on your own. And then with those tools, that the reading and writing tools that we have down here, it also has those links for like checklists and tools that you can use to progress monitor. So it'll have, things like this that you can print and have, you can use that and have for your data for your kids. I just want to thank you guys for joining us today,